you go.
They may come bother us at some point.
Oh, wow. It's going to be a fun night. Shalom. Good evening. Good morning. Good afternoon. We are global. We are TMS Roundtable Global. And I forget to say that I'm Dr. Tova Goldfein. And, we'll talk about what the show's all about in the next hour. So I'm so happy always on Monday night to be aging gracefully with my dear co-host, Rose. Hi.
Hi, Tova.
Hi down there in Melbourne.
Hi. Tuesday morning here. Listen, folks, we have got two amazing yoga teachers as Michael's guests, and we're going to talk about the benefits, I suppose you might say, the present moment, how it is that our breathing is part of our emotional life. And we're going to have a pause in a few moments and do some breathing and quiet restoration of our lives. Now, many of you are at the latter part of the day, so you're going to be going to bed. More of you are mid-afternoon, and of course, down here in Aussie and New Zealand, it's first thing in the morning. So for each of those moments in the day, yoga and that contemplation, that breathing, that quietening down will benefit whatever phase of the day you're in. So I welcome Michael. Would you mind introducing our guests, please?
Yes, I'm just trying to share this really quickly on the All the Rage page now. That is done, and here I am. So I just all run Thousand Petals Yoga, which was an in-person yoga studio in China, but is now.
Michael, you're freezing a bit. Earth to Michael, come in. Michael. He's going to have to refresh. Hold that note.
Okay.
Oh, there he goes. The director has to refresh. Oh, wait, now I'm going to try this. See?
Hey.
There you go. Okay, here comes Michael. Yeah. Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah. Okay, start over.
Okay, thank you.
From hello.
Hi. Welcome to Sommer and Paul, who are yoga teachers who own a studio in Chapel Hill called Thousand Petals Yoga. That was an in-person studio where I started practicing 2 years ago. And now it's online. So it's thousandpetalsyoga.com. And anybody can check out their live stream classes, which are 4 times a week. But they also have an extensive library of classes that they've developed over the last year. And it's from beginner to intermediate to over the top that you can't do unless you're them. But I think it's
where do you fit, Michael?
Yeah, where do you fit?
It's somewhere in between beginner and intermediate. Like beginner's a little too easy and intermediate's a little too hard, which is kind of like how I live my life.
It's
never quite
perfect.
comfortable. But as someone who is involved in this community because I had some serious back pain problems and I largely overcame them, I was really lucky to find the Thousand Petals when I did, because I was having some very stressful things going on in my life, and it really grounded me. My first class was actually an intermediate class, which should have sent me running because it was way beyond my capability. But I started going once or twice a week, and soon I was going 3 or 4 times a week, and then I was going 5 or 6 times a week because it was really helpful to me in terms of not just a physical practice, but helping me to kind of deepen the balance emotionally and physically, which I think most people who struggle with any kind of pain or health issue can benefit from. And the thing that what I really want to be able to talk about today is how to bring that idea of balance into all our lives, because many of the people who struggle with, the mind-body issues tend to be people who push themselves too much. So they push themselves out of balance. And so there's this tendency to overdo it and not recognize that balance means actually giving oneself space to be with themselves or be with their feelings, or just not push themselves beyond their capacity. I mean, it's still something that I'm struggling with even at this point, because I keep pushing a little too far, and then my hips are getting tight, and so I'm having to just really try and find that balance right now. So as a good example, this morning, there was a morning live stream, and I woke up at 9, and I'm stiff in the morning, but I said, okay, I'm going to do the 9 o'clock live stream. And I did it up until the point when I was supposed to put my shoulder under my leg. And I said, actually, I think now I'll step out and I'll do a yoga 101 for the rest of my practice today, which was the right call for me because I wasn't going to be able to do the back bends at 9 a.m. this morning. And so that's me learning, you know.
So you loved yourself. So Michael loved himself and accepted himself for not being able to do it.
Exactly. And that's a hard practice for people. It's really hard for me to not push myself beyond what my capacity is. That's my, de facto. I can do this when I can't. And so then you push too far and then you set yourself back, or you don't even realize that that's keeping you out of balance. And so much of what the Thousand Petals practice, the Hatha Yoga practice is about balance. And balance doesn't mean being able to get into every pose and be perfectly balanced. It means being able to recognize that you can't get into the pose and go as far as you can on day 1. And on day 100, look back and realize, oh, yeah, I'm farther than I was. I'm certainly, I haven't been doing this 20 years, but I'm farther than I was. And being okay with that. And part of that's so much also about, in Paul's classes, there's a lot of been discussion recently about just being aware of our negative thoughts and how if you just habitually go, oh, I can't do that. Oh, I can't do that. Oh, I can't do that. Well, of course you can't do it. But if you go, I'm going to try to go as far as I can. And that was great. I did good. Then you start to be able to do it. Like, our thoughts really, if you change your mind, you can change your life. So, with that,
excellent. Could I add for our audience, would you mind saying a little bit about what was happening in your personal life? Now, Michael took time out to actually do yoga, do the meditation, and stay grounded because in his own life, he was in a period where most of us would run away from doing anything for ourselves. And he was dealing with a mother who was very unwell and subsequently died. And going to that yoga class gave him grounding. Would you mind just expanding on that a little bit, Michael, so our viewers will be able to see that they've got issues in their own lives, they've got pain, and they've got other problems going on, and the last thing they want to do is do something like yoga because, it will take away from their imaginary, I suppose, time dealing with their other issues.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, so it was beginning of 2019, my mom ended up in the hospital with pneumonia. And I did what I typically do. I spent 5 nights in the hospital with her and pushed myself way beyond my capacity while we were finishing a film. And then we went and presented the film and we got protested for the film, which was really devastating. So that's the point when my friend Caroline said she was coming over and making me go run with her every day because I was not in a good place. And then she took me to yoga and I was like, okay, I'm going to just keep doing this. And so I started doing that. And then my mom fell and crushed her skull. So it was really a very rough place. And what it was so helpful at the time was just helping me to move into a place of accepting where she was. Because with a brain injury like she had, every day was different. And, at first we were really pushing, we're going to get you better. And then it was like, no, you're not going to get better. And how do we keep you comfortable and accept you where you are? Which was not a very comfortable place a lot of times. So for instance, every day I would show up and she was moving out of her room back to where she lived, but she didn't remember where she lived. And moving out of her room meant packing up everything. And then we had to unpack everything later. But she was also not very nice about it. So it was just really difficult. But learning to just be like, okay, let me help you with that. Let me help you with that. Let me help you with that. Without yoga and that kind of practice of acceptance, and then being able to go to yoga after 3 hours of that really helped me get through a very difficult time. And so that's why I'm very committed to it and very appreciative of it, because I don't know how well I would have handled that process. Because part of it was, there would be times when it'd be like, okay, I have to go. I can't be here anymore. When I really, there was a person there who was helping her who wasn't very helpful, but I was like, I'm done. This is it. I've reached my limit. I got to go. And I would go to yoga, even if I felt like I needed to be there. So part of me was that helper person was like, I have to stay there for her. And part of it was like, actually, I can't. So I'll see you later. And I remember that particularly because, like I said, she was in the hospital and I was there every night for 5 nights. When she fell and she had to go to the emergency room, and then she was doing a little bit better, but she was trying to pull out all of her wires in the neuro. And I was like, I'll see you later, Mom, because I wasn't going to be able to help. And I just said to the people, please take care of her. And that meant they actually had to restrain her that night. But I knew that I wasn't going to be able to be there for her for the next 4 months if I didn't take care of myself. So it was through that process, and the yoga process was helpful for that as well. Yeah.
Let's hear from
Fantastic.
Sommer and Paul, and introduce them, Michael.
Yeah, well, what I would love is for you to introduce yourselves as your yoga teachers who have an online studio and everything, but introduce yourselves, and then maybe set us up for the rest of the conversation with a short meditation, because that's how we start every class. And I think that kind of grounding is really important, even for this discussion, so that we're all settled and ready.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having us. I'm Sommer Sobin, and this is...
I'm Paul.
And yeah, we both teach. We've been practicing for over 20 plus years, and we have now a virtual studio thanks to COVID. We went from the brick and mortar into this new space where we can reach more globally, which has actually been quite fun. And
Yeah, we have people coming to our classes from all over the world. So Saturday morning, it's like a giant party. We have people coming in from Europe. We have people coming in from, well, pretty much everywhere, all over the States, Costa Rica. So it's been a huge shift for us, and it's been a total blast.
International.
Yeah, a very unexpected gift of growth in this time, to be able to share what we're passionate about. And Michael's, a star student. He's your dream. He's someone coming in need of relief of suffering, both physical and emotional and spiritual. And the piece to me that I'm pointing to when I say dream student is we have this Sanskrit word out of our tradition it means adhikara. It's called adhikara, and it means like the capacity, the studentship. And this is such a key that we can get in contact with our drive and our longing to be free, to get out of our own suffering, or to be able to meet our loved one who's suffering and meet them where they are. It takes a certain level of fire. And I'm just thinking in the context of, working with chronic pain or working with any units that we might have that's really hard to overcome. In order to get the momentum to work through that compulsory behavior, we have to tap into the passion and the desire and the drive to do that. So Michael exemplifies this student who he's not mild, right? He's spicy. He's on the spectrum of extra spice, because the willingness to show up and do the work is there. And getting started is the hard part. So like maybe at first it's really uncomfortable to say, I want to feel what I'm feeling. I want to feel my body. I want to feel the grief that's here or the pain that's here. But once you start working in remembering what it is that you're seeking and being open to the possibility of relief or of greater freedom for self or others, then it begins to create its own path and momentum. Have witnessed that in his process and in our own.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of, to the question here, that really speaks to the fact that this is much more than a physical practice. It truly is this spiritual, emotional practice. It's all tied together. But just getting in your body, showing up, coming to the mat, and being willing to be vulnerable, being willing to just show yourself. And we saw Michael in many different ways, and at the deepest of the depths, and at his brightest too. And so just showing up is really the key. Just make the effort. Abhyasa is the Sanskrit word, a consistency over a long period of time. And you can apply this to whatever your studies are, whether it's a yoga practice, you're studying a musical instrument, but you come, you show up, and you do it over an extended period of time, and good things happen. And the other piece is vairagya. So it's a willingness to let go, right? So we're not attached necessarily to the outcome of the results. We show up and we do it just for the sake of being there. And we have a goal, but we're not attached to the goal. There's a relinquishing of the need for way other than it is.
And then you're free. You don't have a timeline. You don't have like, I'm going to be happy when it looks like this, or one day in the future when X, Y, and Z happens.
Right.
So our favorite thing as teachers is to have students like Michael who show up as they are, and just to help feed them in their process, because it feeds us. And, you teach what you need to learn. So everything that we're teaching, and from our students, what we're receiving is just a big give and take process. And it's very beautiful.
Right.
Beautiful.
I want to just point out the first question is, isn't it both spiritual and physical? And I think that is exactly it. I mean, and it's that even though you're doing something physical, it's funny because, like I said, I've been doing it for 2 years. And even now I've gone back and I'm doing the 101 at times because Caroline said, oh, that's a great thing. You should do that. So I'm doing it. And it's interesting just to think about, like, first trying these poses and being like, I had no idea. I just no idea. Like, even the push and the pull and the balance and the effort and non-effort it takes years and years to do and be able to find that. But it's the same with thought as well. And you find yourself thinking like, oh gosh, I would have been so negative about this before. And I was actually taking a walk after class this morning, and I was kind of lost in thought. And then I stopped and I looked around and I was like, because there was a sign in our neighborhood like, what do you want to do after COVID? And I was thinking travel, and I was like, oh, because you go travel and everything's new. But if you just open your goddamn eyes, everything's new all the time. I mean, I was walking down a hill I've walked down 100 times. I was like, I've never looked at it this way. And and that's yoga just as much as trying to do a triangle pose. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to cultivate what's called adbhuta, it's a sense of wonderment. It's saying exactly that, because we all feel sometimes like we need to be somewhere else to be at peace, right? There's like, we love Costa Rica. We can't wait to go back to Costa Rica because we're so relaxed there. It's cold here, it's raining. It's hard to find that place of center where you are, and really to cultivate wonderment, to realize like the amazingness of everything, the movement of your hands, the colors of the room. The fact that we're doing this right now, and you're in Australia, Israel, and Michael, you're around the corner, but we haven't seen each other in a year. Like, it's pretty amazing. So,
the presence process, Michael and Rose. The presence process, which is another topic. It's so about being present, and yoga is breath, and breath is being present. And we're finding that being present is one of the greatest roads to move from chronic pain to harmony, to no pain.
Right.
So it's really coming together.
I mean, I'm not Buddhist, but looking at what the Buddha said, suffering is anytime we're resisting what is.
Exactly. Yeah. We need to have that in
suffering is when we are
resisting what is.
And that's
what is
resisting what is. And it's another way you can say it is like, don't fight with reality. Is another way to say it.
Yeah. This comes from our tradition of tantric philosophy teaching in the yogic realm. But whatever you're experiencing is, in fact, the portal or the entry point to the revelation, to the freedom that you're seeking. So there's no other place to be. There's no other experience to be having. There's nothing else but what's exactly upon us. And we can use that, whether we like it or not, really doesn't matter. But we can use that and open ourselves up to what's actually emergently unfolding in the now, whether it be pain or whether it be pleasure and joyful, and allow ourselves to tap into vulnerability and aliveness, and then see what comes forth from there. So we spend most of our time pushing away, resisting, judging, thinking into the future or clinging to the past. And that's where our suffering exists. So this capacity to be with the breath draws us right into the moment. The capacity to really get embodied, to feel the physicality and the aliveness of being in the physical body anchors us into the now And then we have this development of the capacities of what the Buddha is pointing to. It's like, these are practices for how to be with what is. It doesn't mean we do yoga or any practice and then we're more joyful and then we're totally peaceful all the time. It literally helps us just be with what is. There's a lot out there that's hard to be with. So we keep practicing.
So, even the postures you talk about, the over-the-top practices we do, they're fun, they're playful, but ultimately we're going into these positions, these very uncomfortable positions sometimes, like what you're saying, putting your shoulder under your leg, to actually be with what is. It's not about forcing yourself. It's not about, the frustration being with the frustration that arises when you can't do that particular thing and not clinging to it. But, the physicality of the practice is the spirituality, because it's training you to be with what is. And it can be really uncomfortable. And as we all know, especially on this call, because of chronic pain, life can be pretty uncomfortable. So training ourselves to be how to breathe, how to breathe effectively, and how to train the mind to see through all this stuff that's coming up all the time. The negativity bias is what I've been teaching on what you were referring to earlier, Michael, this tendency of the mind to constantly look for what's wrong in any situation. And so that is the training here on the yoga mat, is that the spirituality is to be with what is and to focus on what's good and how you can enlighten your mind in this way. So that's the way we teach. That's our emphasis.
I was going to say at this point, maybe we should just recenter or start as you would in a yoga practice, and then we'll move even deeper into that discussion. But like, we used to do this when we would start these discussions, is say, let's have a moment of meditation, because so much of our lives is filled with this kind of energy flying around, and it's so important to just center. So that was the plan. Let's go ahead and do that and have you guys lead us in that.
Summer is about the deepest person that I know, so I'm going to allow you that, but she's going to get you there.
Well, come along. Come along.
I just
well, so we can just, wherever you find yourself, close your eyes. And if that's uncomfortable, sometimes it's too much to close the eyes. Keep them softly open and find a downcast view, a little just view of your eyes looking down, not at anything in particular. And take a couple slow, deep breaths. Breathing in and out through the nose rather than mouth breathing is going to automatically help relax the mind and the body. And you can just start to feel yourself with every slow breath out, relaxing into whatever seat you're in. Physically feel your hips, your legs, your feet settling. Just like you're in bed at night and your body starts to slow down and relax right before sleep and everything just drops. You're invoking that, and you can do that in any moment you bring attention to it. And then take notice of any sounds that might be nearby in the space that you're in or around you. And just let them be part of the unfolding of this moment, incorporating them in, welcoming it all. Feeling the body heavy and relaxed into the support under you, noticing all the sounds, if any. And then just bring sensitivity to the feeling sense on the skin, your clothing touching your body, hugging you. The air around you, whether it's warm, feeling the air hugging your body, giving your body its shape and form. And then aware of the breath that's moving without you having to do a thing. This gift of breath somehow gracefully pumping through your body, choosing you to be alive right now. And every inhale is this receptivity, saying yes to life. And every exhale, you breathe yourself out into the web of life, just sharing interbeingness, shared breath with all forms of life, seen and unseen. You can just feel yourself free for the period of this conversation that we're sharing together. Anything that's been occupying your mind, anything that's maybe been heavy in your heart, just give it some space, kind of hold it in lightness, knowing that you can come back to it at any time, but you're giving your whole self to being present in this very moment that's here, exploring what it means not to hold yourself back, your life force. Really let it be here. Listen deeply. Feel deeply. And whenever you're ready, you can gently bring your awareness back, open your eyes if they're closed, and just feel what it's like to feel more present, more centered, physically, emotionally, mentally. I think it feels good.
Thank you. Yeah. So
Thank you. That was beautiful.
with that, I think, I would continue on and maybe make the connection between the practice that you do, which is both physical and emotional, and how we do that. And I don't know if you just saw, but we just saw the question: do you work with people who aren't mobile? And you just did. So if you can elaborate on just how much that your yoga practice is really about being with ideas and feelings as much as it is physical.
Absolutely. Hatha Yoga is referring to the postural form, but it's one branch. We use this image of a tree. The trunk is presence, awakening to what is, awakening to the state that we have. And we have these different entry points, different types of practices that can bring us to the core of that. And they're just doorways. So Hatha Yoga is one, but meditation and the steps towards meditation, we start with learning how to concentrate, just focusing the mind. I don't have to watch every thought. I had this vision today during my sitting practice of, my thoughts they were happening. They were really active today. And I just thought of it like cars going by, like, oh, today's a heavy traffic day. And instead of trying to annihilate the busyness that was happening, it's like, oh, I'm just recognizing there's a lot of traffic going on today. And that capacity to notice and then not have to be so passionately curious to follow every single thought. I can make a little bit more space and a little more space, and they're still there, but I'm not super engaged. And then the sense of a deepening of something, of a presence, starts to build more and more. From concentration, we find ourselves more absorbed into what's actually happening. And we might start to call that meditation. So learning how to be with the experience of the physical body, whether we can mobilize in the postures, that's just using the gross element of the outer form of the 5 elements of our bodies. But we're not limited to that. The infinite possibility of our consciousness and our mind and our breath is really what we're getting to. But for most of us, we're denser. And so, especially in the Western consciousness, using the body is a really helpful way to get in, because we need to be kind of pounded and prepped and softened and tenderized to be more available to that. But some of us don't need that. And our way might be through prayer, through devotion, through art, through any other way that really begins to soften and open you up. And then we can learn to anchor our attention in the present moment. And boom, we're right at the heart again. That just infinitely deepens. It's a practice with no end, no goal even.
When you said the thing about, your thoughts were zooming around like traffic, I had an image of a preschool teacher at recess with the kids running around wildly, right? And what they mostly need is just to be seen at times. So you don't need to yell at them to slow down. It's actually just seeing them, and then they they know what's expected and they start to slow down. And then if you just stay present, then everything starts to calm down around you. But if you throw energy at something like, hey, you're doing that too much, or you know, same with your thoughts. So if you grab onto the thoughts and try and stop them, then they're going to go like that. But if you just are aware of them, they start to, like you said, slow down by themselves because they feel acknowledged without being embraced or stopped. You know?
Right. The other thing,
Observed.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Rose.
No, just comment, observed.
Yeah.
Observe your thoughts.
Yeah.
As Sommer said before.
To add to that, just that to remember for those who are new to meditation, one of the most frustrating things for new meditators is to think they're not doing it right because they're lost in thought all the time. And to remember that as soon as you see that you're lost in thought, you're no longer lost in thought. So
exactly,
that witnessing of it, and then you're present again. And the more you do that, the more you train yourself to see it, the more it becomes part of your everyday. But regardless of how many years you spend in meditation, there are going to be times where it's going to be very peaceful and you're going to have these great openings. And even say you've been meditating 40, 50 years, forever, and you're going to have days where you're completely lost the entire time. And the practice is just, again, to show up and do it and know that things are going to unfold in so many different dimensions and levels within your being. And it's the same thing with the Hatha Yoga practice. So if you have the mobility to show up and you can move your body in that way, things are going to happen on many different levels. It's not just the physical. And, you know, we've had so many experiences. Think about the mind-body connection with students through the years, countless times where we'll have somebody who just starts crying in class. It just starts coming out. They're like, I don't know why I'm crying. I don't know what's happening. And usually it's fire logs. It's just a deep hip opener. That's kind of like the one.
But not limited.
But not limited to fire logs. And Sommer can tell you, because when we first started practicing, she was constantly crying. Waterworks. Like it just, we're storing. And think about it, like every time you have some fear, you have some kind of anxious thought, you have whatever's happening, like in your mind, if you really pay close enough attention, you're going to see some part of your body, especially with fear, is going to be tightening up, and you're just not aware of it. And the more you tighten, the pattern gets developed in these different places, the more you create this restriction, the more you hold on to it, it gets imprinted on so many levels of your being. And so the physical practice really helps to move that stuff, and you can have these incredible releases.
So I wanted to, Paul, I wanted to dialogue with you and Sommer about this. And also I'd love to hear Rose's opinion. So many of the people that we talk to, are dealing with fear. And there's surely a part that comes from the medical doctor who I'm not criticizing, but he'll say, don't move. And this is their sort of like cookbook. And I'm just always saying that, it's not black or white. If, most people can move with a little bit of yoga, and the minute they start to bring blood and oxygen, the whole process begins to unfold. And then, Rose has taught me a lot about that. First of all, when you do yoga, you get to know your body. You get to feel what's going on. You get in touch with your body. So when you're in touch with your body, you get to be closer to your feelings. When you feel the discomfort in your body, it's like, oh, I'm feeling some fear there. So I imagine people come in and they're full of fear. And this leads to TMS, and that's another story. But I think, in response to what Susie's saying, if someone's not as mobile, what would you do to get them a little bit more? I mean, again, I'm saying as a doctor for many years, and Rose is saying as a nurse for many years, we're allowed to move. Movement is healing. So I'd like to put aside what the doctor said and kind of look at, movement and healing and fear, right, Rose? Do you want to say something about the fear and movement and?
Well, no. What I'd really like to ask Paul to do is to repeat what he just said about how the system works, and because this is the key to what's happening with chronic pain. The thoughts come up. The tension comes up, and the thoughts virtually become stored somehow, and the body responds over and over. And Paul, you said it very succinctly. Would you mind sort of repeating what you just said in conjunction with the fact that tears come out the tears are coming out because the body's being released, isn't it? And the grief and the sadness for how we've held ourselves tight is allowed to come out and be expressed. Could you sort of expand on that a little bit more?
Can you repeat it again?
Beautiful.
I don't even hear it exactly the way you said it. Please.
So you just explained it beautifully, Rose. I will do my best to remember, but yes, what I was saying is that every time some sort of thought form arises, and usually for sure around fear and anxiety, each time that thought form arises, you're going to store it. There's some part of your body, or many parts, that you're not aware of in those moments that are clenching. It could be your jaw, it could be your hip flexors, or your hips, or your low back, right? And so each time that thought arises, there's going to be this tension. And more often than not, a pattern will develop where it's the same spot over and over, and it gets more and more bound up. And so we're storing the fear and the emotion in our body. And then all of a sudden you get on the yoga mat or whatever type of movement form you're doing. And I'll address that movement piece as well, because movement is life. You start to move into these places and that gets stirred up, and it's not conscious. So when people are having these emotional releases and they're like, I don't even know why, I'm not thinking about anything. It has nothing to do with the thoughts at that point. It has to do with the stored energy in these different spots that just needs to get moved. And those restrictions in the body can create so much suffering, and so much the trauma of it can lead to all sorts of things other than just muscle tightness, right? Chronic pain, cancer, like we just keep pushing these things deeper in. And what I love about the Hatha Yoga practice, it really, and movement in general, it just helps you to move this stuff out. But consciously, like that's our focus with our practice. We keep our classes very playful, a lot of fun, very lighthearted, but consciously being aware of what's happening and the fact that we're moving energy.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I would say, so before we got into teaching yoga, Paul used to own a couple of restaurant places, and we met in that setting. So we got to the point over time where someone would come in and I knew their personality structure, like order, over time you're like, oh, this is like, I know what kind of food they're going to order or drink they're going to order. And I got to the point where I would almost nail it every time. It kind of blew my mind. So now, flash to now, as working with thousands of bodies over all these years, I have a similar experience. We both do, where someone can walk in and you can just see the posture and see the breath movement and the demeanor. And it expresses a kind of archetype, soul mood, if you will. You can tell if there's a lot of grief or anxiety or pain. And what's exciting on our end is we working with breath, working with biomechanics. We believe movement is life. Whatever you can do, even little movements, even if it's just breath movement, you're taking the frozen rivers of emotion and the frozen memories and the frozen energetic, and you're starting to let the natural life flow. And the inherent intelligence, the organic intelligence of the body can then take over and do its thing. So we don't have to sit there and process. Some people need that, but we don't always have to process every single thing verbally or even consciously. No, we just let the tears flow and we let it move out. Now, the interesting thing that we've developed over time, and many of our peers have seen, and we've talked about this, is there are these areas in the body that tend to hold certain emotions, like the quads, your thighs, grip with anxiety and fear. And so that tightness is usually with that personality or that energetic of anxiety and fear. Or you'll see the upward pull of the energy in the shoulders, in the neck, the jaw. So there are these commonalities that we all share. So I might now in my own body say, oh, I'm experiencing a lot of fear and anxiety. I mean, 2020 brought it strong. So I can feel my body responding and storing that tension that I'm not even knowing consciously how I'm picking up. It's the field of life. So I've been doing a lot of personal practices and sharing practices on opening this up and thigh stretches, and then the breath and the diaphragm can begin to organically do its thing, and we can come back to harmony over and over again.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Actually, talk a little bit more about vibration, because that's what came up in my mind when you were, because as you were speaking, you were vibrating. You probably didn't notice it, but there was this vibration in your body as you spoke. Can you, I'm sure you're aware of it, but I don't know that you actually saw it in the moment. But I think that our people have lost that vibration, you know, that groundedness of having the 2 feet on the ground, on the earth, and the vibration that comes with being human.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
I think when, again, I love the term organic intelligence, because we all inherently have this. We all are only this. We're nature. And when we get into dominance of these habits of fear, anxiety, pain, where we only see ourselves as that, we've othered parts of ourselves, and we've, like we have on our planet, begun to separate ourselves away from our natural interconnected state. And I like to think of it simply as, you know, when I close my eyes and turn to my breath, I might first notice the climate or the weather, like the busy traffic or the kids running around. I love that analogy. And then I can think, what is nature's pace? Like, what is my vibration when my heart is open? I usually will picture myself in Costa Rica. That's my spot.
Or Italy.
Or Italy. It doesn't have to be outward, but you know, there's a feeling that arises in the memory of being in these places where my heart feels expanded, my being feels vibrant, and I feel creative, I feel alive. So conjuring up that sense, then I can drop needing to be there and just feel and breathe. This is my nature's pace. And nature has no rush, no agenda. Nature cycles, there's cycles where we feel we're at spring's peak of fullness and we're blossoming in life. Then there are cycles of decay and dissolution. And maybe being there is hard, but I can naturally rest into that place and trust that that's always holding us. So I don't know if that hits it, but that's where I felt inspired to share from.
So positive. I love it.
Yeah. And, you know, another reflection came to me as you spoke, and that was that, you know, I don't know if it's a recent acknowledgement, but trees communicate and via their roots. And I thought, you know, we communicate, as you said, about noticing people, the tight shoulders. You can actually see in their face if their stomach is churning or whatever. You can see in their face that they've got a low-grade headache. So the same thing is happening in us as human beings. If we stop, step back, and then we can reach out, step back into what's happening in us, and then reach out to others. And that's that vibration that I saw in you earlier on, Sommer, as we spoke. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And I love what you're saying, that you can see that. And then we can also affect that by saying, oh, let me relax. Like by relaxing my face or my jaw, my eyes, my shoulders, and I'm noticing that moment that I'm tight, then I can unfurl and begin to return back again. So we can see it, and then we can also use these practices from the outside in.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think that's one of the things about the practice that is really important is in almost every posture, there's a reminder, relax your jaw. Even though this is painful, try to find a way to smile, because it's an acknowledgement that the physical actions of our body also send a message to our emotional body to relax or that we're safe. So for instance, putting your head on the ground. So you're telling your body you're safe. And this goes back a lot to a lot about what TMS is about in a sense. When we describe it for a lot of people, you have your amygdala in the middle of your brain, which is, the lizard brain, which is fight or flight. And it's not cognitive. our cognitive brain, which intellectualizes things, doesn't speak to the amygdala very well. And there's a guy that I want to bring up. His name is Ashok Gupta, and he's been doing a lot of work with long COVID because he cured himself of chronic fatigue with these same ideas, because he recognized that you have to teach the thinking brain to be able to communicate to the lizard brain. And he has this really great example in which he talks about a guy who's walking along and he's lost in thought. So he steps off the curb and he almost gets hit by a bus, but his lizard brain pulls him back on the curb. And that's the moment of truth. If the cognitive brain or the amygdala checks in with the cognitive brain and says, are those things scary, i.e. buses? And your brain's like, oh my God, buses are scary. Now, every time you see a bus, your body protects you by putting you into fight or flight. But you don't even become conscious of it anymore. However, if your amygdala checks in with your brain and says, no, being lost in thought without paying attention where you're going, that's stupid. So your brain, when you're lost in thought, might bring you back to the present. That'd be a better way to do it. And the whole point is, it's awareness, which comes through, say, things like the practice of yoga, where you're like, oh, I see how I'm gripping there because I feel like I'm scared to go into this pose. But if actually I just slowly relax into it, my body allows me to, and then I feel safe. Oh, look what I can do now that I'm not scared. And so when you look at, if your mindset is one of fear, right, then you're constantly in a state of things are scary. Your body is going to be in a state of everything's scary, and that feels normal. And when you're not in a state like that, then you feel actually even more anxious because you feel like you're not safe. So that's when you have to use your thinking brain to talk to your amygdala and say, no, we're safe. No, we're safe. And so like a mindfulness, a meditation practice, and a yoga practice, all those things combined, start to retrain yourself to feel comfortable being calm. Because for many of us, it feels like you're not safe if you're not doing something, or if you're not working,
yes,
you're failing. So it's all these kind of self-imposed structures, some of which are conscious, some of which are unconscious, and some which are deeply unconscious. So it's really complex, but also very simple.
Change your mind, change your life.
That's it.
It's really
problem, though, isn't
common among a lot of pain sufferers about the fear of stillness. Is so common, and it's not like we notice it with clients, and I don't want to criticize them and say, well, you don't know how to be, you just know how to do, but it's more like it's the imbalance, and we're just so good at doing, and we're not finding a lot of joy yet in being. So the question is for everybody is, why is it so scared to be still? Why is it so scared to be?
Yes, that's so passionate in my heart. We live in a world that praises doingness, and we get rewarded for it. We get diplomas, we get paid more. It's our social structure and our status because of our doingness. So we haven't shared in a culture that praises this receptivity to being. Yeah. And so we're fighting against streams of generational streams and ancestral streams of survival and doing. So I think that's helpful to acknowledge why it's so hard. Or that's one aspect of why it might be so difficult to overcome. And then the way I work with it, because I'm not at all immune to that, a mother with 2 children and a lot of plates spinning, is I just try to be curious every day what it's like to be, and just to rest and to allow the moment of life to be enough. I remember reading one time a little quote, and I'll paraphrase, from Mother Teresa, actually, and she said, is it not enough to be a simple little blue wildflower in the field of wildflowers? And for that image speaks to me so deeply. Is it not enough that we are just here alive and breathing? And we have this world with so many projects and things that need tending to, and it's true. And at the same time, that puts it into, there's a there to get to, and there's always more, and this hypervigilance or our own lives feel complex and overwhelming, and our pain is overwhelming, and it feels like, how are we ever going to chip away? But if you invert it and you say, well, let me just rest into beingness and appreciate the spirit of life that I have in this moment. And maybe the more we claim just the life that's right here, and that like maybe surviving this day is actually my part personally giving to the whole of all, that is in fact what is needed. Like that's my prayer, that's my offering, that's the gift all in one. The subtle inner work that we're all doing is part of the whole of that. And the work of beingness is very feminine, and we're just moving into people getting more curious about that.
Right.
Actually, Sommer, I was just thinking as you were talking, you know, in yoga, there's this looking at people's radiance. Yeah, I just sort of saw your radiance there just now as you spoke, and it was just beautiful. Would you just share a little bit about that, about just how we have a radiance, and sometimes that radiance is sort of dampened down by suffering, because we're, you know, suffering in a way is not a bad thing. I know it sounds a bit bizarre, because it draws us back into ourselves, and it forces us, if we take the message, to create peace within us. But as you spoke, that sort of radiance about you came out, and I don't want to talk about you per se, but to talk about the fact that we have a radiance. And when we become angry with ourselves, we dim that radiance, we dim it down. And that's why I was talking about vibration before. You know, we vibrate all the time, out and out and out. And that vibration, like the trees, as they communicate, we actually vibrate to one another, and we can have a symmetry or a harmony. I don't know. I'm not a yoga teacher, but I see it in
Next
you.
month.
That's all. Yeah.
Next month. I like that. Well, yes, even entrainment of energetics. So the space here of all of us and these radiant hearts, we in one another, even what's mind-blowing to me virtually, like we're entraining our breath and our hearts together and our consciousness. And the principle that there's this, I'm going to use my own words, but you can replace with whatever, this divine spark that lives in us, that is us, that every single human is absolutely a piece of this divinity, that every human is worthy of life, that every human in whatever journey they're having is necessary, and their gifts, their skills, their passions, everybody is needed in this collective endeavor. And it's not for us to judge whether that's good or bad, or want someone else's, because our journey into that, usually suffering is our greatest teacher. When we're up against the wall and we're encountering these thought forces in us that are telling us, I'm not good enough, I'm broken, I'm lesser than, whatever the lack story of that is, which we all have some version of it, is trying to tell us and cover up and cloak that light. But the light can't be extinguished. Who we really are is always there, even if we forget about it. We might take, a lifetime of forgetting about it. That's okay. But we get glimpses of it. And when we get a glimpse, or if I see that light in you, it's like your candlelight. I go and lean in and I light my candle from yours. And so then we just keep lighting each other up. And in that way, to me, keeping great company is really important. We had a teacher, philosophy teacher, who always said, you are the company you keep. So keep company. And that means raise yourself up. Like if you're struggling to know your light and your essence, you're struggling to have hope, to want to live even, to really surround yourself in conversations like this with people who are holding this vibration that you can light your candle from. And even if you can't see it, be curious. I don't know that's true in me, but let me hold it as a question. I'm open to knowing that radiance in me, and let me live into that question.
Could I just bring that back to attachment theory? You know, when a child has that radiance in them, that pure joy, and they break, well, I don't know, the cup, and then the person that they love so completely and so fully gives them a nasty response, you know, my precious cup. And they forget that that human being next to them, that's what's precious. So in a way, when people have had that response from their love, like they've put out their love to the caregiver, and the caregiver only gives half a cup back, then the belief is that I'm not enough, that my light is not enough to be shared around. I just want to sort of bring that sort of model to our viewers, because really our light is there. As Sommer said, our light is there, and it can never be overcome by darkness. Light always overcomes darkness. It actually gives me goosebumps to say that. It's just a beautiful saying. Yeah. So thank you for that. And you know, see yourself, viewers, as having that light, and somehow it's been extinguished or dampened down, but it's still there. And when you hold yourself to find that light, it will, you know, like when we give a breath of oxygen to our candle, it goes, it flares up. And that's exactly how our inner life is. Once we notice how we've cut ourselves off, from the light. So
It's true.
just another reflection that you caused me to have.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
Paul, you want to say something, Paul?
I was going to say something before. I think it was I guess we could tie it into this, and it goes back to the beingness question. Why is it so hard to just be? And part of it, I think, you know, I agree, and I think these are tie into each other. Is this need to strive, this feeling like I've got to stay up with things, I've got to get ahead. What our friend Jeff calls the individual achiever. Like we just have this mindset we have to achieve. And I was going to say the other piece of it is trauma. You know, our trauma that we've just, you know, it's been imprinted us from when we were born. That child that's trying to take care with us, you know, if we're just going to be, there's going to have to be a willingness to look at that, and it's not fun, it's not comfortable, and I think people,
it's painful.
Yeah, so there's a tendency to look away. I don't want to see what's there because it's not pretty, and
right. And
I was just saying, it's about sitting with, like, back to that whole idea of discomfort. It's like sitting with this stuff. And, you know, we've been through the fire. We both, you know, we've dealt with all sorts of stuff, like every human being alive, right? We all have our trauma, and the need to actually, if you really want to raise yourself up and you really want to shine the light and then hold that light for others, there has to be a willingness to go into the fire.
Yeah.
Right.
Beautiful.
Two
Perfect. Yes.
Two things you brought up kind of reflected back to earlier. One is, you know, the thoughts going around like traffic, which is just like the kids running around the playground, is really like kids running around the playground, because a lot of those thoughts that we have are just impulses from earlier parts of ourselves that haven't been integrated in those moments of trauma. Yeah. And partly when we sit with that, it's uncomfortable because it's a lot of negative thinking. It's those thoughts that haven't been dealt with. And so meditation is a process sometimes of just sitting with those and being aware of them and saying, you know, in one sense, you're like, the thinker isn't the thoughts, right? The thinker is the one observing the thoughts, but those thoughts are part of us that are still banging around like little atoms banging around in a system. And so
in our skull.
Yeah, in our skull. And so partly they're uncomfortable feelings, they're uncomfortable thoughts. So we want to be busy so we don't let those thoughts overwhelm us. You know.
Yeah.
It is.
But
in actual fact, we need them to germinate up and be free, don't we?
We do. And it takes me back to that thought again, like you said, we all have our own traumas. I think one thing that a lot of us do is say, well, my trauma isn't so great. These other traumas are really bad. Mine doesn't even qualify as trauma. And so when we belittle it or denigrate it, we don't allow ourselves to free ourselves of it because we think it's not even worthy of recognizing, which is just one way of us pushing it down, because it's all relative. You know, a child who gets yelled at for dropping a cup, that the trauma of that can be as great as being hit by a car when you're 15, because it's just all relative to where our brain is at and how we can process it. And so I think it's just important to not denigrate it, because the more you can just be with it, the more you can let it go. The more we resist it, the more it's going to be begging for our attention, and the more we're going to be in that place of suffering because we haven't, let it go. We haven't seen it from a different perspective.
And right there, if I could, it's, I think a lot of people get off track where they say, all right, I'm in, there's a lot going on, all of these voices, they feel like a big project. I have to handle all of this mess in my head, all these kids running around screaming. How am I ever going to deal with this? And the beautiful thing about being present is that we're going in a dark, for whatever reason, one little candlelight is really working with me. We're going in the dark room with our one tiny candle, and we're just sitting there. And the power of being willing to sit there does what needs to be done. And depending on how long those thoughts have been playing out, it might take a while. Fine. But all we're doing is being. We're not having to annihilate them. We're not having to do a bunch of stuff. We're just holding the candlelight by showing up. And sometimes showing up and it's really staticky and it's missing to show up, whatever it is, we're dragging ourselves there, but we're just holding that candle.
Yeah, bring that back to Michael and the trauma of trying to be there for 5 nights or 7 nights a week while mum's in intensive care. Yeah. That whole thing is facing that, holding that candle, facing the darkness, and I suppose being consistent or something, being I don't know.
The force of love,
strong.
The force of love of a son. That's just willingness to show up is so healing.
Yeah. And exhausting.
And exhausting and challenging, because in that situation, my dad also died quite tragically. He was hit by a car 14 years before that. And so when I was in that space with my mom and she was really, really ill, 2 things were going on. One is when I was in the emergency room with her, I found out that I had a 25-year-old daughter. Literally, I got a text saying, I just spoke to your daughter. So that was going on. And my mom kept thinking I was my dad. So she kept trying to not just kiss me, but slip in the tongue. It's really uncomfortable. And I had to wipe her because the other people weren't. I mean, it was a lot, And I, wasn't really sleeping, and she was suffering, and it was a lot. And my mom could be really difficult, so it was a lot. And to hold on to that for 5 days, and then I was really depleted for a while. So that's what I'm saying is but I also felt this incredible level of this frame of I have to do this. And truthfully, I kind of did. I don't think she would have made it if I didn't, but maybe she didn't need to make it because then the rest of the time was all suffering. So it's all these different balances of what should I do? And that's where I was kind of just learning acceptance, but also it was just bringing up a lot of, all those traumas were coming up and having to still be present and deal with it. So it was just, that was that's something I'm actually still kind of working through because it all brought it up in a way that made it possible to work through. If that makes any sense. Yeah.
And that's where our suffering can actually become, our gift. The healing, your pain, you've transformed, sharing your story, reaching out as a gift to give a light of hope to others.
Yeah.
Your journey is a healing journey that brings your gifts forward. And that's where we can work with gratitude, even when we might be struggling and suffering. Our suffering is not for naught. If we're willing to be vulnerable and to share it, even if it feels like, how is this going to be helpful? Just sharing and letting someone else know you're not alone in this pressure cooker of life where we're all learning and growing and healing and waking up. It's a messy thing.
Yeah. And we're all kind of always told, here, clean up. Don't be too messy. Don't let your emotions spill over on somebody else. And yet still, we do have to acknowledge that and try and figure out, like, how do we be with our emotions? Oh, look, there's Caroline.
For a run? Ready for a run?
That's funny. Caroline's the one who, hey, look, it's Sommer and Paul.
What are you doing there?
Here, why don't you take one?
Hi, Caroline.
Hi.
This is funny. This was not planned, but we're doing a little talk about emotions and yoga and health.
Oh,
And Caroline
my
is the one.
emotions are always happy ones.
Most of the time.
Not balanced. Not balanced.
It's not balanced.
That's not balanced?
No.
Full of joy for life.
What are you hiding, Caroline? What are you hiding?
Gosh, I wish I knew. Wouldn't that be easier?
Well, we're getting there. We're getting there. We're all getting there.
Well, that's cute. I don't want to interrupt your thing. I'm going to go talk to Suki here.
Yeah, she's maybe taking a nap.
Okay, I love you guys.
Love you too. Great to see you.
I was thinking about, there's, Facebook page is all about caretakers and caregivers, and now when you go to a Facebook page and you want to join, it's like a pain or disease. They ask you, do you have the disease? Are you a caretaker? So what we're talking about is, first of all, taking care of someone. We're talking about a child who can't be a child now. It has to be the parent, which is mind-blowing at any age. It happened to me at a younger age with my mom. So it's like different levels of taking care of yourself so you can take care of another. Like, Rose will bring up the thing about being in an airplane, that you have to put the air mask on your face first before your child so you can save them. It's like what Michael was doing was in survival mode those 5 days, like layers and layers, and then trying to be real, and then like covering up. It's like the confusion.
Right.
Really.
Well, I mean, it makes me think a lot about how, one of the problems we have in our society is, since we're not as kind of enmeshed in the religious cultures, which gave us rituals, which allowed us to change our relationships, we really struggle with that. So that was particularly difficult when my mom was ill, because she wouldn't, she was very controlling over her own life. So when she needed help, it was very hard. She didn't want to take it. And so I was thrust into this role of having to be a caretaker, but also being not allowed to take care of her. And that's where I had to be, that's the place I had to really move into the acceptance of, I can only take care of her as much as she'll allow me to. And that's all I can do. And that, just finding that it's hard though. You want to help somebody and they won't let you help them. That was the biggest part of the practice, was just accepting that she can only take whatever help she can take. And that's the same as was true with the movie, swinging back to that, like that idea of like, okay, being vulnerable and then having some people just absolutely fucking hate you for it. I mean, there are people who are so angry about it, very few, but when they are, it's like, oh, that's about them. It's not about me. And then just being okay with it, not being reactive to it. And then learning also to offer these ideas and say the movie with no expectation whatsoever, just kind of leaving it there without even any explanation most of the time. This might be useful. That's it. And if it's not, it's not. If it is great. But if it's not, it's like, it's not my fault.
Exactly. Listen, Michael, I was reminded as you spoke about Harper telling you about you don't always have to be awesome.
Yeah.
What did she say?
Oh, Fiona
Dad,
said,
you can
let
let
someone
other
be
people
awesome
be awesome
for a
too.
while.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a hard lesson to learn.
Amazing.
Yeah, but that's the lesson you were learning with your mother, wasn't it?
Exactly.
And that you were saying that she can only do so much.
Right.
And if she hasn't got the receptors to accept your love and your care, you can only give what she can accept.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
there's a lot of self-protection.
Paul and Sommer, would you chat a bit about working with people in chronic pain, maybe somebody who can't move so much, or somebody that's maybe in a wheelchair, Or, I mean, I would love to hear maybe some cases and situations where you had to really help somebody deal with their fear of movement, because it's terrifying. I mean, people don't understand about pain. It's terrifying until they understand it.
It's very individualized on the person. We have both worked with lots of people with chronic pain, and I worked with a man who had terrible edema in his legs and he was in a wheelchair. And it's the way I chose to work with him and in general is you honor where they're at. You don't overdo it, especially in the beginning. But at some point, and this is, I think, this applies to anything. Like for a really good teacher, the word in Sanskrit is diksha, and diksha means an initiation. And the teacher can see when the student is ready to take that next step. And it's this thing where it's like, it's very easy to coddle the person's fear, and it's honoring the fear, but then also seeing like, okay, this person is ready to move on. It's their fear that's holding them back. I see that it's so much the pain, and there's no formula, is what I would say. It's just, it really depends on the person, depends on your intuition and what you're feeling with the person, and vibration, right? What we're talking about, vibration, and knowing when to take that next step.
Wow.
So, but mobility, if there's mobility to be had, from my perspective, is you want to keep people moving, even if it means it's just doing this with their hand, and whatever it takes to keep the body moving. Because if you don't, the body will decay, and that's essential for me.
Wow. Amazing.
I'm thinking of a couple different people that I've had the honor to work with, some of whom are blind or in a wheelchair. One aspect of it that comes to mind for me, we all, if we get on the mat and we're going to move, one, I promise you, it's not always going to feel good. And we have to learn the difference between like acute pain and discomfort. And a lot of times the discomfort is physical, but it's also enmeshed with emotional discomfort. And that's actually where we want to be. Not that we always need to have a friction rub of discomfort, but oftentimes that is in fact the training ground. So when we talk about balance, I'm looking or witnessing somebody, and I can have these fundamental principles in mind, knowing the biomechanics and knowing kind of how things work with breath and body, but I'm not experiencing what they're experiencing internally. And so each person then learns their own language to trust their body. And it's something that gets developed over time as we practice listening to the difference of the body speaking. Again, acute, sharp pain, no, we're not going to stay there. But pain where I can breathe, and as I breathe and I'm staying with it, it begins to maybe move. It's a sense that it's moving in the body, or there's a color, or there's a memory, or maybe I sigh and something just moves on multidimensional levels. And so we seek to empower people that language so that we might even be cueing in the public class setting, 30, 50 different bodies. There's no way I can know what one individual is experiencing. So it's in everyone's benefit that we have this capacity growing within. And then each person learns that, how to listen. And so whether it's micro movements, if we're more immobilized, there's still always possibly, I've worked with people where you would think, how are they even able to do anything? Well, there's always movement. We can move our eyes, we can work with our breath, we can use our senses, our felt sense, we can move our toes perhaps, whatever it is. And then as teachers, our job, and the more that we have worked in this realm, it develops as a skill, is to know that initiatory moment of when we might be able to offer the encouragement of a next step taken, and the individual is left always in freedom to listen and know whether to take that step or not. So it's
beautiful.
Yeah.
Excellent. It's like It's like, people need to learn about themselves so they know what their limit is, because, and they can, and that's the way to look at the fear in the face and realize that it's the word fear more than anything else. And it's the greatest gift we can give patients and clients is to get to know, and yoga is an incredible way to know your body. There's some of the doctors call the muscles the orphan organ. It just doesn't get a whole lot of attention, but it's where we're storing lifetimes of memories.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. So the muscles are a beautiful part of the body.
Yeah. I was just thinking while you were talking how in the nursery, like nowadays, I don't know about in America, but here we try to not keep babies in the nursery. But like when you were on night duty, the first baby that cried, you quickly picked them up and tried to calm them, because the whole nursery, the whole 30 babies would be crying in 10 minutes if you didn't calm the first one. So that's that interaction. And the other day I was noticing, I think maybe on YouTube, I can't remember now, but something I saw, and someone on the train was laughing at nothing. Right. And everybody on the train,
I saw.
Yeah, I'm sure you've all seen it. But that same thing, if it's bad, we're going to add badness to, like we're going to talk about things that are bad. But, we can actually laugh at nothing and give those muscles a chance to be exercised where, just as an aside.
It's not only that, though. When we laugh, others laugh with us. One of the,
That's right,
the greatest moments of
or
my
if
life.
we cry.
Yeah.
My
father was a laugher. Yeah.
It only takes 16 muscles to smile, and it takes 43 to frown.
No way.
Well, they.
So some would
work
say
really hard, so you try and frown a lot.
So yeah, some would say you should frown more because it's a better workout.
Oh my God.
Okay, wait, right. This guy, part of the magic of when he's teaching and holding space for people is the laughter.
Right.
He's completely irreverent sometimes.
Look at that straight face. Look at that straight face. You can't believe a joke's going to come out of that straight face.
Exactly. And that's the healing. That's the medicine, because people, like, you forget your story, for a minute, and you just soften and laugh, or you're doing something impossibly hard in your body on the mat, and you start laughing, and then you've forgotten your storyline.
Oh.
I try to keep it very playful, and that's just kind of my nature and who I am in life. I'm very serious. I take everything in my life very seriously and very lightheartedly as well.
That's where we started. Like we've just done a wheel.
Yeah, exactly.
Good.
Yes.
I think we're going to have you back.
As Michael said,
we're going to have you back. First of all, you got to find your kids, because I asked you where they were and you said you didn't know. Second of all,
so personally, we forgot we have kids.
We'd love to figure out a way to do a class. I mean, look, everyone's doing a class online, but I find that my glasses are off because when I want to do yoga, so I can't really see the TV, so it's a problem, but I'll figure it out. So, but I would love to have maybe a class. We'll bring you back in a few months, and somehow maybe we can do a class, and Michael can show off his flexibility. And
well, but you know what, what would be even better is if people start and go and take some of the classes. They're there at thousandpetalsyoga.com.
I watched one. It was amazing. And I think I'm going to sign up. I mean, for the laughter, if anything. What do you think, Rose? Let's do it.
Well, I want to be clear. So our subscription library has over 40 classes now. And so for those in chronic pain, there may not be that many physical classes there. There are some gentle. There's some chair. We have a few classes for that you're just sitting in a chair. We have some where you're supine. We have a little
website, www.
thousandpetalsyoga.com, spelled out THOUSAND.
Can you tell us, after you're done talking, where the Thousand Petals came from? It's a beautiful name.
Yeah, we'll do. And the petals with a T. Not a, because a lot of people are like, is that a D? So it's a T. But we have classes on there. We have progressive series for beginners. So there's Yoga 101 and Yoga 102, and they're still pretty challenging. We also have a Mellow Yellow series, which is very relaxing, chill practices. So for those with chronic pain, there's a 7-day free trial, so you can just check it out and see if any classes will work for you.
Meditation.
Meditation.
There's also meditation. I was going to say, yeah. There's several meditations, so it's something.
Yeah.
We have like titles of classes. Like I have a whole series called "Your Day is About to Get a Whole Lot Better." So we keep it light and playful, but there's a lot of depth. And yeah, we'd be happy to come back and we could do a live class here because we have all the equipment. We could hook it up.
We could have Michael demo.
Yeah. Everybody watch.
Where did Thousand Petals come from?
Oh, you wanna?
So it's in reference to the crown chakra. In the yogic tradition, we have these energetic, subtle centers in the body, the chakra system. And it is the 1,000-petaled lotus opening up to the cosmic energy. So this idea that on our crown, we're grounded on earth and we're also connected to the heavens. And it's this channel of awakening in embodiment, like not awakening and transcending, but actually embodiment, awakening through the body, through the senses to the beauty of life that's here.
Wow.
Could I add that hydrangea, I think in a Chinese sort of mythology or whatever,
Yeah.
has something like 1,000 petals, and that's where I was thinking you were coming from, and I also thought that whole idea of having one flower but 1,000 petals on it, which is just awesome. And coming from there, I just want to wish everyone with a Chinese background or a Chinese not background a happy new year.
Yeah. Happy Lunar New Year.
Yeah.
It's a Chinese New Year?
Yeah.
The year of
Anyway,
The year of what?
thank you all.
the ox.
The ox.
Talks.
Unbelievable.
Not the ox, but the ox.
Well, and Rose and
Thank you both.
we're going
for
to
the
have
three of you.
we're going to have a retreat, and we're going to have you guys come and do yoga for our retreat.
Let's do
This is
it.
in person or virtual?
It's going to be in Israel.
Virtual. Oh, no, we've got our retreat in daily life. What are you talking about, Tova? We've got our presence process coming up.
We're pretty stoked. Is that what we're talking about?
Dreaming. I'm talking about dreams come true.
Let's make it happen.
She's manifesting. Let her manifest.
Okay. All right. Listen, guys, it's nearly 5:30.
Yeah.
We need to wind up.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you guys for
the
coming.
three of you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, Tova, for turning up every week with me as well
Thank you, Rose.
and sharing the beauties of being alive and of being human. It's just
It's
amazing.
about a year now that you
Pain
guys have
and
been
all.
doing this, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
April 13th, I think, was the first show. It's beyond belief. And Michael was there.
Yeah.
Michael was there.
Well, Michael instigated it. What are you
Michael was
talking
on
about?
fire. I don't know. It
I
was
went
all-
along with it.
What was that, Michael?
he said,
I said I went along with it. I don't,
Oh, you went along with it, did you? And are you happy with the fruit of your going along with?
absolutely. I think you guys are incredible, and I think you're doing
Michael,
great.
can you tell us how you really feel?
I feel
He
wonderful.
has, Tova. Take it for what he said.
I think it's
and
deeper.
grab it. What?
But
You're looking for
that-
criticism now.
no. No, but tell me how you really feel. It's comedy
Well,
right
that
there.
picture, I'm bragging, that picture of Michael it was on the beach in Caesarea, which is on the Mediterranean. And I think that was before. It was before your mom died. Had you gone to yoga yet?
Yeah, I had been going for several months, but it was actually the day before, and I got the call the next morning that I had to fly back. I flew
Right.
back. I made
Yeah.
it with 2 hours to spare.
Right.
She passed away at 11, and I got up at 8:30 and made the 9 o'clock class or the 10 o'clock class
I remember.
because I had to. I just had to. I was really.
So you see the yoga
I just
as
needed to be grounded.
something that it fills you for the day. Like it gives you something to go with the
I just
day.
needed that grounding to get through the next few days, which I did.
Wow.
Exactly. It's the grounding. It's the grounding that the yoga gives you, I think. That
Yeah.
that feet on the ground like a tree.
I can't remember her name, but there was a woman who was sitting next to me, and she said, "How are you doing?" And I said, "I'm okay. My mom died last night." You know, but I'm here.
When my father passed, right as the funeral finished, I went directly to a yoga studio in class. Same.
Right.
So helpful.
That was
Wow.
Was that was a year ago?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
We'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about death, which is
I often think of movement or yoga or any of those slow movements and tai chi, not what's it called, qigong.
Tai Chi.
It's sort of it's prayer in movement.
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
All right. Well, a
Okay.
friend who I haven't seen in 5 years just showed up, so I'm gonna go too.
Good morning. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon. Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Love you guys.
Our pleasure.